and welcome back to Midnight History. Each night, we walk together into the silent corridors of the past, where empires crumble, voices fade, and history is written not only in stone, but in whispers. Tonight's journey is one of shadows and sorrow. The story of a family who once ruled a vast empire, only to meet their fate in a dark basement far from the palaces of St. Petersburg. So make yourself comfortable, dim the lights, and let us step quietly into the year 1918, the night the Romanovs fell. The Romanovs were not just rulers. For more than 300 years, their dynasty had been the living symbol of imperial Russia. Their portraits hung in palaces, their names were carved into the stones of cathedrals, their soldiers marched across continents in their name, and yet, in July of 1918, that dynasty was reduced to a single house in the Ural Mountains, a house guarded by men who carried not the banners of empire, but the rifles of revolution. This is not the story of politics alone. It is the story of a father, a mother, and 5 children. A story of hope, fear, betrayal, and the silence that followed a burst of gunfire in the night. By 1918, Russia was in chaos. The Great War had devoured millions of lives. Revolution had torn down the monarchy. Civil war raged between the Red and White armies. Nicholas II, once crowned with divine right, was no longer Tsar, but a prisoner. Alongside him were his wife, Empress Alexandra, their daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and the young heir, Alexei. Once they had lived in palaces of gold and marble, now they were confined within the modest walls of the Ipatiev House in Yekaterinburg. The guards called it the House of Special Purpose. For the Romanovs, it was a prison of whispers. On July 16th, 1918, the family tried to keep to their routine. They read, they prayed, they whispered of rescue. Outside, rumors spread that White Army forces were advancing. Perhaps salvation was near. But in another room, Yakov Yurovsky, commandant of the guards, studied a telegram from Moscow. Its orders were final. The Romanovs must not survive the night. That evening, Alexandra read scripture to her children. Anastasia sketched small figures in her notebook. The Tsar, weary but composed, tried to reassure them. Unseen to them, men were preparing pistols, bayonets, and acid. The night had already chosen its course. Just after midnight, the family was woken and told they were being moved for their safety. Nicholas carried young Alexei, too frail to walk. They descended into a narrow basement room, whitewashed walls, bare floor, and a single chair. Nicholas asked for another chair for Alexei. It was provided. Then Yurovsky cleared his throat. Guards entered, armed with revolvers. Nicholas turned, confused. What? What is this? In that moment, history held its breath. Yakov Yurovsky raised his hand. His words were short, cold. Nicholas Alexandrovich, in view of the fact that your relatives continue their attack on Soviet Russia, you are sentenced to death. The Tsar barely had time to reply, "What? What?" before the room erupted. Pistols cracked, smoke filled the air. Nicholas was the first to fall. Alexandra gasped, clutching her chest. The daughters screamed. The guards fired wildly, the small basement echoing with chaos. But the bullets did not end it quickly. The Romanov daughters, wearing corsets sewn with diamonds and jewels, were partly shielded from the first shots. They cried out as bayonets and more bullets followed. It took long, brutal minutes. When silence fell again, 11 bodies lay scattered on the basement floor. The Tsar, the Empress, their 5 children, and 4 loyal servants. The dynasty of Romanov was no more. The killers faced another problem: what to do with the bodies. Through the night, they loaded the corpses into a truck. Rain fell. The roads turned to mud. They first tried to hide them in a nearby mine shaft, but it was too shallow. At last, they dug a pit in the forest, doused the bodies with acid, and buried them beneath timber and earth. The Bolsheviks announced that Nicholas had been executed, but for years, rumors swirled. Some said Anastasia survived. Others whispered of escape. In truth, the Romanovs were gone, their resting place hidden until the 1,990 seconds, when DNA confirmed their remains. The fall of the Romanovs did not end the bloodshed. Russia sank deeper into civil war, famine, and terror. The empire they once ruled became the Soviet Union, a state built not on crowns, but on ideology and fear. Yet the image of that final night endures. A father and mother, 5 children huddled in a basement, a family that once lived in palaces, reduced to whispers and shadows. History remembers Nicholas II as a flawed ruler, Alexandra as a woman under Rasputin's sway, and their dynasty as blind to the storm of revolution. But in their last moments, they were something else, simply a family caught in the gears of history. And so ended more than 3 centuries of Romanov rule. Not with a coronation, not with a throne room, but with silence in a cellar. The night of July 16th, 1918, remains one of history's stark reminders that empires rise, empires fall, and sometimes the end comes not with grandeur, but with a whisper and a gunshot. Thank you for joining us on Midnight History. If tonight's story moved you, consider subscribing for more journeys into the nights that changed our world. Now, may your night be gentle, your sleep deep, and your dreams free of shadows. Good night.